Hello everyone, I'm Taaka Awori, founder and CEO of Busara Africa, a Pan-African leadership development firm. Welcome to the Leadership in Africa Redefined podcast. This podcast seeks to do two things. One, change the narrative of leadership in Africa, and two, provide concrete strategies and tips for leading in an African context. We do this by interviewing amazing African leaders so that the narrative of leadership in Africa is defined by the best of us, not the worst of us. We share their stories and provide practical suggestions for dealing with the challenges of leading on this continent. We discuss, interrogate, and examine concrete leadership practices that work. We also look at failures that these leaders faced and how they navigated their ways back on track. It's an exciting and empowering space for leaders to thrive and engage. Subscribe to the show to become the leader you have always wanted to be. And if you like the show, be sure you rate it and review it. It helps others to find it. Thanks so much.
Yay, we're good to go. All right. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Leadership in Africa Redefined, the podcast. So, as usual, I have an exciting guest with me today. It's actually a woman who I've admired. I admired for a long time. She doesn't know I was admiring her even before I met her. But I admired her for a long time, had read her bio, and then I was able to meet her in person this year in Kigali at the High-Level Leadership Forum that was organized by the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf Center for the Amuje Leaders, of which she is part of. And you will see, as I introduce her, you will see why I absolutely find her so inspiring. So my guest today is Umra Omar. And she's a Kenyan humanitarian, community development strategist, and social entrepreneur. She's founder and executive director of Safari Doctors, a non-for-profit organization that provides healthcare and conservation services to marginalized communities in Lamu, Kenya. Now, Umra's journey is inspiring. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a hint of it because I'm also going to ask her to share a bit about that. But she grew up in Lamu, Kenya, and later traveled to study abroad. So after completing grad school in the US and working in Washington, D.C., she returned back to Kenya in 2010. And you will see, this is why I think, aside from being such an amazing leader, I think Umra's story is such a wonderful one for so many leaders who have been away, have come home, and have really struggled in the sense of belonging, but not quite belonging. So we're going to come to that as I start to ask Umra some of the questions for her. But she came back to Kenya in 2010. And in 2015, she founded Safari Doctors to address the region's healthcare and conservation challenges. And those of you who have not been to Lamu, please now start booking your tickets to one of the most beautiful spaces in the world. Now, Umra's work has been recognized globally because Safari Doctors you reach about 2,000 patients monthly across 24 remote villages. And because of this, Umra has been recognized globally. She's received numerous awards, including the 2017 CNN Hero of the Year Award, Africa Leaders for Change Award, featured in Business Daily's Top 40 Under 40 Women list. And she won the United Nations in Kenya Person of the Year Award. And there is so many awards that she has won, and not surprisingly. So Umra, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Taaka. No, thank you.
How are you?
It's such a treat. I'm doing very, very well. And
Great.
I am super excited that we finally get to catch up.
Yes. You see how in Kigali I said to you, Umra, oh my, before we separated, I was like, I have a huge favor. I already knew. I was
pleasure.
Like, this woman has to appear on the podcast.
Pleasure.
Thank you. So as I was alluding to, Umra, I think your story is particularly powerful because I come across so many leaders who have been, the classical, was it Chinua Achebe who coined the term Bintus? Was it him who came with that term, but who have been to wherever, have come back and have really struggled to find that they can still have an impact, that they're still relevant, that they can be understood. And then we lose so much talent because they give up and they leave. And I think it's such a shame. But somehow you seem to have cracked it. And you didn't just come back and come back to Nairobi, but you came back to Lamu, which is, again, as I said, is a special place. It's quite a unique place. But maybe that's where I'll start in my question. And maybe start by sharing with our audience, Umra. Give us a sense of what a regular day would look like for you as a young girl growing up in Lamu. And maybe you can describe, I'm assuming people know Lamu, but maybe they don't know about how special and unique Lamu is. So maybe you can explain that as you tell us about a day in your childhood.
I'm gonna have to try really hard and capture that in words, because Lamu is one of like the most complex culturally, professionally, even like just the socially, that we can talk a place that you can go from like this Uber Santorini experience on one island, and then you go to like the most depressed corner of our communities where you lack every basic access to basic services that you can think of. So I use the word, it's almost like a schizophrenic place. And for me, I was just very fortunate to grow up in a setup where somebody on the outside might come and describe it as poverty, but it was actually a richness of community, of everyone being their brother's keeper. So, you go to your madrasa classes, you go to school, you come. I was raised by my grandmother primarily. And it's just every childhood's dream of freedom, which I think today, more and more in the city, we sense like we're losing that connectivity to the earth, to our communities, and to just kids being able to be kids. So that was a childhood. I had a really cool childhood of climbing mango trees, going to the neighbors, just fetching water. And then before moving to Nairobi and first coming across something called electricity, and going to school, being dropped off, and the cold, of course. So it was a beautiful childhood.
Amazing. And I love the way you start to describe Lamu in terms of the juxtaposition of the beautiful tourism, but also it's always that sense of inequality we have in so many of our countries and spaces. But also I like the way you bring up how sometimes what we see as poverty is not real poverty. Can also be a richness. It's always not just the economic. There can be a richness in terms of community and all of that. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe say a little bit more about Lamu. Those who may know, Lamu is an island, right? Are you an island?
So Lamu is more complex nowadays after the devolution. Lamu used to be island, like you have the Lamu archipelago, 7 habitable islands and over 3 dozen small islands. And then you have a main island called Lamu. And then in that Lamu island, you have a town called Lamu. So so there's 4 Lamus. We say there's Lamu County, Lamu Archipelago, Lamu Island, and Lamu Town. And what we have today is, what people know is the Lamu Island. So let's say I come from Pate Island, which is part of the Lamu Archipelago, much more rural. And then you have Kiwayu, you have Ndao. So it's a string of islands going all the way to borderline Somalia, which is our last islands going up north. And then now you have the mainland side of Lamu, where there's diversity, cultural diversity, ethnic diversity, religious diversity. So you can find the entire of Kenya almost encapsulated in Lamu County.
Fascinating. Okay. So then that brings me to the fact that you moved to Nairobi and then eventually moved to the US, and then eventually came home back to Kenya. And then in 2015, moved back specifically to Lamu. Tell us about that. What drove you there? What was the impetus behind that? And particularly, what was the impetus behind Safari Doctors?
So
Yes.
I always swing back to the saying that to whom much is given, much more is expected. And all
Yeah.
the opportunities that I got in education primarily were to do with my origins of being a Lamu girl child that was able to, go through education Nairobi. And then I went on to UW, United World College of the Atlantic in Wales. And from there, got a
Oh,
scholarship to go to Ohio. And then got an opportunity to study abroad in South America. So it felt like just the whole world was kind of given and also taken because you have to earn that opportunity. So after working for about a year of an internship year in the US, they say you hit that 10 mark of being abroad for 10 years. And that's when, it's a point of no return. It's when you
yes.
maybe taken out a mortgage, fallen in love, it's just that.
Am I going or am
So
I staying? Yes.
So we were talking with most of my friends. We had a really good friend in South Africa whom we moved like right after graduating. And I was like, oh, already you're leaving? And we were left like two of us of the three musketeers. And I was like, okay, this is it. When it was during 2010, during the Waka Waka, it's time for Africa, Shakira,
Yes.
the
Yes.
World
Yes.
Cup. And I was like, oh, Umar, this is it right here. If this finds you on this side of the fence, you're doomed. So that's when I moved back home. I literally went from home straight to the World Cup. And that was like my celebration of
Wow.
going back. And
Wow.
then fortunately, with that leap of faith, I remember I was telling my mom, like, what, I'm coming home. She's like, do you have a job? I was like, no, I'll figure it out. And if you come back, please don't complain about my cooking or my rules because you're more than welcome, but the rules did not change just because you're away. So that was a
Love it.
threat. But no, fortunately, an opportunity came up to work with a philanthropy organization literally after quitting my job in the US. And then that's when I moved to Nairobi, got into that comfortable life of being a city girl, young, working at a really good organization. And honestly, it was beautifully frustrating because I was envious of the work that we were supporting of
Okay.
people who are going out to protest, young women who are really holding their ground, widows from in Kisumu that are navigating inheritance law. You go to people organizing around addiction, and like it was working with all these underdog communities, but yet with the strongest individuals that I'd ever met. So then that's when, after like about 2 years of the office job, I decided to step out and just reevaluate what I wanted my role to be in society. So that's why I've taken some time out in Lamu, which is when I came across a project that
Uh-huh.
had stopped because of the insecurities in the area.
Yes.
And Safari Doctors was actually founded in the year right after the Mpeketoni terror attacks. I
Oh,
think for me that was the biggest pull. Like, this is where I'm from. It was all over the press, and it just felt like we have to be on this side and figure out what needed to happen. So then that's when we found out about a project that was actually called Sailing Doctors,
okay.
and it was run as a CSR project. But because tourism had gone down after the kidnappings and the terror attacks, that project shut down. And it combined all the elements I love: healthcare, traveling, and making a difference at home. So that's how Safari Doctors was founded.
Powerful. And just say a little bit about what Safari Doctors does before I
Yeah,
come to what it's like to lead an organization like that.
yeah. So SD is Safari Doctors is the word safari. I remember we were talking to my sister and it's like, what are we gonna call this? It's not sailing. We're traveling to rural areas and
Mm.
bringing healthcare, like doing mobile clinics every month. And she's like, well, if you're going by boat and you're going on the road, and then if you fly down there as well, then that sounds like it's a journey, it's a safari. So it's all modes of transport. And then because it's a Swahili word that when you hear it in foreign spaces, it's luxury. And
Yes.
on our
Yes.
side, it's the journey between life and death.
Yes.
And that's like, it really captures also the extremism of the inequalities, is that you have this same word that has been co-opted to mean, bush, amazing bush experience, but then it's traveling to access healthcare. And Africa as a continent where over 70% of our population is in rural areas, yet we're still using these centralized models of service delivery. And it just, people on the margins are not able to access these basic human rights. So that's how the word Safari Doctors was formed. It was just me and a nurse, and all we had to do was just put fuel on his bike. He gets immunization, and he goes out to these villages that had been closed off in Basuba ward. Started with 5 villages, 100 women, and then I thought I would still go back to the US or Nairobi. But then it just took a life of its own, and I'm still stuck here. And we now that the organization is stabilized, 2 years ago is when, for the first time in like 8 years, I think, I now saw myself like being able to move out of the bubble life to be able to go back into the world.
Yeah. Wow. So now I'm sure it's not just a nurse. You have probably a whole team of medical practitioners who are going community to community, providing these mobile health services, huh?
So we have 18 staff members. We're working on a joint venture to do a hospital. We go into Garissa and Tana River as well. We have our own medical center and this clinic outposts in Lamu. So it's now very exciting to see it take a life of its own, and really having institutionalized that entire operation that started as a by the way give back project of just the two members on the team.
Wow. See why I say you're inspiring?
Thank you, Taaka. No, you make it sound so big. It's just organic, something taking that organic pathway, basically.
Hi, folks. Hope you're enjoying the show. So have you heard about the Africa Leaders Circle? Our impactful e-learning platform that enables you to grow into the leader you would want to follow? Here is a message to tell you what you need to know.
Are you a CEO, executive director, or HR manager that is looking to build a pipeline of leaders that are ready to step up into management roles? Are you looking for a self-paced learning platform that provides your leaders with quality content and does not take them away from their work for too long? Are you looking for a program that enables your managers to move from knowledge acquisition to demonstrable improved practice? Then look no further. Sign them up for the African Leaders Circle today. The African Leaders Circle is an e-learning platform that gives your managers access to an exclusive community of leaders across the continent and a wide range of strategies and tools to stand out. We do this through online courses, discussion forums, a library of resources, and a personal learning advisor to support each of your managers to maximize their learning on the platform. To learn more, visit our website www.busara-africa.com.
Don't forget to visit our website busara-africa.com to learn more. And now back to the show.
To me, you make it sound so small, but I tell you why it's so big as I listen to you, Umra, because I'm hearing someone who had choices and options. You could have stayed in DC. You could have stayed in Nairobi in that, I love what you call it, the luxury, that bubble, that philanthropy bubble. But you made a choice. And I think increasingly, again, this is why my whole thing about telling different stories about leadership. We have leaders who are making choices that are about the development of this continent. So to me, I wave my flag at that. And it's exciting to see how it's grown. So let me move in that direction in terms of what it has meant to grow an organization from 2 people to 18, and knowing that leading, you don't lead in abstract, you lead in a context, a cultural context. So you who has been from Wales to South America to DC to Nairobi, you're so cosmopolitan. And so you're almost straddling both. Huh? I can see clearly you have your roots deeply in Lamu, your grandma, your ma, but also you're a world citizen. How have you balanced that, or what have been the tensions in that as you have grown this organization? I know women, you're saying who, it means they have been there. Dying to hear.
You capture it so well in your book, Leadership in Africa Redefined. Is that I really enjoyed the chapter where you're talking about people, like leadership being clumped up. Like, if it's Africa, it must be, you're stereotyped as an entirety.
Yes.
You're kind of put in this box. But then other communities are allowed to be accountable individually. We see the same thing with Islam as a religion. If a Muslim does it, it's the entire Muslim community. If it's, a Christian or another mainstream, it's as an individual. You see it in race. If a Black person does this, the whole entire. So for me, it was the same, navigating that same space, is that if you're a woman or if you're from this culture, here's the check boxes that, applies to all of you. And so the first thing was kind of an internal, what you call that self-love, which is not easy. It happens over time to find that grounding, because it's a grounding that even your closest people would not understand or recognize. But you really, it's some serious depth. Like you're literally peeling off these onion layers about yourself, woman, mother, from Lamu, and all of that. And then when you find that core light in you, I feel like you're able to navigate and redesign your reality. So for me, it came with the spaces you access, traveling on a dhow with a bunch of, men, and going out to do these healthcare services. It applies to dress code, how do you navigate? And at the same time, without offending the roots that you come from, and also not letting that limit you at the same time. And strongly enough, if you have that core conviction and you have results to show about it, then you're at peace, and whoever it is that has an opinion just has to get over it. And it's more for you than anything else. It's more like being, here's my norm, here's what I want to get up and do. If it's like I need to do my yoga, that's what I need to do. If I need to, just this is where I need to live. So I had to decide it based on where I live, the kind of peers that you decide to have, how you want to be represented. And it happens over time. It's not like there's a blueprint around it, but you have to keep going with that gut navigation to be at peace yourself.
You've said so much in that I want to appeal, because some deep stuff. And let me tell you, if this is what I think I hear you saying, is that for you, and I think there's lots of lessons for many of us who are coming, we belong, but not quite. And we're navigating, again, I call it the insider outsider, that we're doing that dance. Huh? That for you, that starting point was grounding and centering in your true north and self-love. And that enabled you to pivot, to decide, yes, okay, I can adjust with this one, I can adapt to this one, but this one, forget it. That's your opinion. That able to you to define what works for me. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's exactly it. And I love how you are able to repackage mumbo jumbos.
Because I think this is such also a key message. I think we can almost, going back to your term, we can almost become we almost become so imbalanced, seeking so hard to belong and to be accepted, and particularly in so many of our patriarchal contexts in this continent, with all its variances. Often the directions we're pulled in are not healthy ones for ourselves. So what I'm hearing from you, and I think is such a powerful message, is this importance of really grounding, centering, and you use the word self-love. And I just love that, because I think many of us leaders are not, it's not something we know how to do. Huh? But what I also like is the fact that you said it's about, once you deliver your results, you make peace with that. So be clear about what is the impact I'm seeking to achieve.
Yeah.
But how do you, does that still help? I mean, I still feel sometimes the bristle of not belonging. Like I'm somehow still not good enough in terms of those norms. How do you navigate that?
Good enough for who is the question. Once you're good enough for yourself, then
I love that.
there's 7 billion people in the world. Who are you trying to be good enough for?
I love that. I love that. Good enough for who? What is this hustle for worthiness? Powerful. Then, in terms of your leadership style, this is again something I've seen folks grapple with. Huh? I've seen folks who are coming from, and it needn't just be people coming from very, from the global north to the global south or whatever, or Western. Sometimes I see it happening with folks who might be coming from a Nairobi type thing or a big multicultural organization to a more local organization. And the expectations of how you will behave as a leader are in a particular way. So how have you had that? Has that been an issue in terms of how all of your 18, how they've expected you to lead?
Oh, that is, I did run for office 2 years ago. So that kind of like just
Yes.
defines everything that you're just asking on. What is it
Yes.
that people have as the expectation versus going against? Like, I checked zero on all the boxes that you can think of. Everything. Age, face, gender, origins, like all of the above. And what what captures that a lot is what we've seen happening in Kenya recently. Let's look at these major protests that have been happening with the younger
Yes.
generation. That goes
Yes.
against every political stereotype you can think of who goes out on the street, how change is made, power being hoarded by a few. Like, that was the epitome of like disruption. People not seeing it, where it's coming from, who's the leader that's pushing this agenda of the reject the finance bill that we saw the mega march on, end of June. And I think that's the opportunity that I see in leadership, is that there's always an empty seat for something that people can never imagine. And it's up to you to capture that imagination in your leadership style. Because it's always about change is always where you least expect it. And when it's questioning that status quo and creating an alternate voice. So I feel like whether we look at Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, whether you look at even somebody who's not named but is, in our own communities, it's always that kind of lone voice of reason that makes you unlock, like, oh, you mean this is possible? Oh, you mean the world is not flat? You have to be a mad person. You have to be that mad person.
There's so many directions I can go. I don't even know where to stop. Because again, so many threads to cross. What I'm hearing from you, and I think this is the gift in your particular leadership approach. You're comfortable being a disruptor. Is that true?
I'm
You're
comfortable
comfortable
in
with disruption.
It's about finding comfort in discomfort.
I like that. Comfort and discomfort, and probably recognizing that discomfort is necessary for growth and change.
Absolutely. There's one really good saying, I forget how it goes, but it's about, you can't give birth without the labor. Like a seed doesn't just grow on top of a surface. It has to puncture through the earth. And so in any kind of growth that you're thinking, there has to be that pressure point. Pressure makes diamonds kind of thing. And I think though we're in a society nowadays that's about complacency, instant gratification. Things are automatic. You just switch on a light and it comes on. It's no longer about, oh, there was fetching firewood, bringing this in, and so the more we, especially with technology, the more we get into this ease in operating basic things. But if you think of how we're wired as human beings, it's about pushing that discomfort in order to emerge stronger and better.
Pushing the discomfort, the pressure points, but also I'm hearing transformation also arising from those of us who are not conformists, those of us who people will say, with all due respect to those with mental illnesses, but those who people will say you are mad. Why do you think you can do it? Huh? That's not how we've always done it. And that's the kind of are you also feeling that that's the kind of leadership we increasingly need to see for our continent to shape, change, transform?
It's not a yes or no answer, because that same kind of leadership could take you down the trenches.
Yeah.
So it's those same qualities. It's like the knife. It's important, but you can use it either to kill or to chop your ingredients.
Yes.
And now it becomes that, and that's where the power of the people comes in. It's like, how do we direct this energy? And that's a tricky one. It's like there are people who are okay with pushing discomfort, but for purely selfish, narcissistic kind of needs, versus those that can push those spaces for the masses. So it's kind of a two sides of a coin. Yeah.
So what
it's
keeps
that
you
navigating that.
As you navigate that, what keeps you true? What keeps you true to your north? I don't want to use a north star because that even implies something in the north. What keeps you? You know what I mean? What keeps you true to your true self, your inner self?
First of all, is motherliness, being that the quality of motherhood, whether it's biologically, whether it's those that are not biologically mothers, whether it's the father that's a mother. But I think like there's a truth in being a guardian of something beyond yourself, and that's who holds you accountable and is raw to the most rawness. You walk by and your child can tell you, that was mean. Why did you do that, mom? So that's the core. And then just having the right, the checks and balances. People, are your checks and balances, that you have the privilege, the purpose to be able to achieve what could be positive or negative, but you do need those rocks, I would call you, and all of us have different. So for me, my rock has always been my family. We've had an amazing upbringing of opportunities, emphasizing education, so rooted in who we are and where we are at home, where, right now, even my parents have retired, but they moved back to their village. A lot of their friends are like, why didn't you like move to a beach house in Kilifi or something? Why would you go look for village drama? So for me, my north is my family.
Oh, powerful.
And even when they disagree with me, there's still that unconditional love. Like, she's a lost case, but let's support her in her madness.
Oh, powerful, powerful. And some of the leadership, what would you say are some of the leadership lessons you have learned along this journey, and how has it impacted your approach?
Along the journey, interesting. The biggest thing now is helpful is accepting that there's no right or wrong, just a lot of opinions and indoctrination. That's been really helpful, to accept otherness, to question yourself, to be adaptable. I remember that happened, especially being in South America, where a lot of what we learned was East versus West, Muslim versus Christian. It was a very like bipolar wiring. And then you go to somewhere like Machu Picchu, and you go to this island called Tequila, where people are like this little 2-year-old kid with rosy cheeks in the middle of an island, and you're like, she doesn't have the same bipolar
Yeah.
reality. Does that mean she's wrong? Does that mean this person is going to help? It was just because there's always that conflict, that dichotomy in our upbringing, whether it's a sport, whether it's whatever, whatever it is. So for me, throughout now that journey, being like open to experiences, to kind of not having that ultimate, because once you have that ultimate truth, then it just negates everyone else.
Yeah, aren't you finding that in contrast to a lot of the people around you? Because I find so many of us on this continent, because of, again, culture, religion, we're so clear that this is right and this is good, this is bad. There is no, as you said, just holding the other, respecting that there's different opinions. So how are you contending with that perspective with other perspectives? How does that work out?
It's about knowing when to keep your mouth shut. It's about knowing when to bring it out and how to bring out such a discussion. There's some places where you nod your head and keep moving. So it's not about fighting, because I feel like if we did, then you become just as a fundamentalist as somebody else.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But what does it mean in terms of, for instance, the organizational culture of safari doctors? Do you find you're equally inclusive, open? Then you would have to influence people's mindsets to. So how does that work?
It gets lived out. You live it out through your actions, right? You walk through our organization and the diversity that's there, the values that we all embody. So you have to figure out what are the things that bring us together despite these differences. People come in and like, oh, you even have a Samburu person in your organization. How did this even happen? And then the same thing, we have a little cottage school that we run, where we're using the Kenya curriculum. And let's say there we have to do IRE or CRE. And we're like, you know what, in this school, we're going to do both. So it's like,
you have to do, what did you say you have to do?
Like in the Kenya curriculum, you either have to do Islamic religious education or Christian religious education.
Okay.
And, and so we're running a school, you have to meet the curriculum, but then how do you live it out as a value? Where we're like, okay, the Muslims will run CRE also, and the Christians will also learn IRE, and look at it as world religions. And it was tricky. So there was resistance with some parents, but we were like, if you believe yours is the right way, why would you have a problem in somebody else learning about it? Or why would you not want to learn what the other view is? So it's kind of living out this diversity in a non-confrontational way, because the moment there's confrontation is where you get resistance. So that's been how, and that would happen when you're talking of, these leadership spaces, whether it's organization, political, differences there. But then how do we also, even those of us who are like preaching diversity, we should also not be fundamentals around it.
I love that. One of my favorite people, Rakesh Rajani. Do you know Rakesh? He was on this. We had him on the podcast earlier, yeah. And Rakesh always asks people to check your fundamentalisms. He says, because all of us tend to walk around with this is the right way, and so I guess we can get the same way in terms of being inclusive. And you must be inclusive. But what I'm hearing from you is that even in our bids to ensure increased diversity and inclusion, we do this. And the sense I'm getting from you is actually from a very loving stance. It's not from a judgmental stance. It's from an accepting of people are different. And that ends up being a lot more powerful than falling into the same trap of judging others for those particular opinions.
Everyone's mother is the best cook, everyone. So
yes.
It's like, yes, but can you also try my mom's food and then see how, Yeah.
I love that. Oh, I could talk to you forever, but I have to discipline myself. So with the last question, maybe, I'll maybe bring us back to where we started and how I mentioned how often I see some of our best and brightest from the continent going, and maybe they don't get to that 10-year mark and they decide to come home. And they're thrust in leadership positions because they're coming with a wealth of experience, the right pedigree of education, and they get into these positions and they just struggle. They struggle to fit in. They struggle to feel they belong. Those who they're leading feel like you don't get us. You're coming with all your Muzungu or Brofosem things. Yeah, exactly. Huh? Don't bring exactly. We all have our ways of saying it in the district. Yeah. What advice would you give leaders who are faced or are facing that particular experience?
First advice is that no one can give you advice.
Ooh, I like that.
If every experience is so unique, first of all,
Okay.
individually, then it is, do you have a family? Do you not have a family? What kind of working environment you're coming in? What are you doing? So that for me, that was the first thing is that, and unfortunately, it didn't happen abruptly. Usually also you are like, okay, I'm going. By the time it hits this year, I'm packing up and then I'm moving home and then I'm gonna. So
Yeah.
it's almost it's too drastic. I was fortunate, like, I was here, it was for 2 months, and then I added another 2 months, and then things, and then you just adding. So it almost felt like a gradual setup until I was like, oh,
Yes.
I think I moved home and I think I'm
Ah.
doing what I want to do. And I compared almost to the being, let's try go to the being a scientist. Whenever you're trying to withdraw from something, whether it's
Uh-huh.
smoking, whether it's addiction, whether it's just a
Uh-huh.
habit you shouldn't be happening, you don't just stop one day and say, okay, I quit, I'm done, this is it. It's like, how do you ease yourself into something? And I think that's the same with working and moving. It's how you're creating your own social circles, how who's there, it's
Yes.
just a lot of moving pieces. Do you have kids? Are you going to be looking for school? So no one can advise you. It's just about how do you wean yourself emotionally, physically, and then now that professionally to be able to take on that change.
Okay. So that weaning, that gradual looking within, but then once you're in and you're navigating that organizational space, any
Mm-hmm.
thoughts in terms of what are practices you have seen without giving advice?
So,
What
so
are things
it's
that
that,
ease it?
yeah, once you come in, I do get that a lot, a lot, that, your
Mm,
way of thinking, this is not how it's done here, or you go into the
yes.
bureaucracy. And it's
Yes.
the first thing is that as long as you're, I mean, coming back home from, especially let's say it's a Western country, it's a
Mm-hmm.
whole different beast. And the first thing is that you can't bring the same set of rule books from the get-go, but you have to start figuring out what are the changes that can happen, not just externally but also within. Like, okay, this I can push immediately, this might require more time, this I need to do it through an ally, this I need to go do some yoga and calm the hell down because it might not happen. So you just go back to the serenity prayer, where you're like, okay, I need the wisdom, the courage, and the serenity to navigate this. What can I change? What can I not change? How do I know the difference? And where do I get the courage to pursue the change? And that's usually my fallback, where I'm like, okay, is this a fight? Is this a battle? Is this a long run? Who can I work with? Who can I not work with? Like the organization that we have is built
Mm-hmm.
primarily on values as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
job description. You could have
Mm-hmm.
somebody who has the best credentials, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, where's their empathy? Where's,
Yes.
their compassion? How
Yes.
would they fare in? And also at home, things are different. It's a lot of the networking. Who do you know when you're looking
Mm.
for people? Put out a cold call for a job, you
Yes.
might, surprise yourself to heaven and back. So it's like, what are these non-textbook ways of professionally jumping into the murky waters? So it's
Mm.
hard to challenge the personal, the professional. You're in a different setup, but at the same time, that's where the beauty is, because you're like, you come here and it's a big canvas. You have so much to bring, It's and like, I was in New York for a while. It's like everyone is painted on this canvas already, and you're looking to like fit in your little squiggle in a corner.
Yes.
Whereas this gives an opportunity to just kind of go to uncharted territories with your ideas.
Love this. Umra, you're so special in terms of the lens with which you bring to situations. There's almost there's a gentleness, there's a wisdom to see the gift even in hardships. Because I love the way you talked about, you see what you can change out there, but also within. Huh? So I can also see from you that your leadership is infused with that inner work, and maybe not even infused, maybe is grounded in that inner work that clearly shows up in how you navigate and show up in the world. So thank you for being the leader that is redefining leadership in Africa, my sister. Asante sana, dada yangu. I truly appreciate.
Thank you for the memo book. It's like a fantastic point of reflection and self-interrogation.
Thank you. So those who are listening on the podcast, what she just did is showed a copy of the book. So I'm so excited. She's busy reading the book. Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So guests, thank you so
Taaka.
much. Yes, you're welcome. Audience, I'm
glad
you joined us.
One, and I can't wait to see you again, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All right. Take care. Thank you all for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Take care. Bye.
Hello, wonderful leader. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the podcast. I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. If you want more of the lessons, experiences, and nuggets for effective leadership, join our amazing platform for leaders, the African Leaders Circle. Learn more at www.busara-africa.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and share with other amazing leaders. See you soon. Ciao.